So far, we've gotten three major portrayals of Spider-Man in cinema, but the question is, which is the best one? Welcome back to another episode, everybody. I'm Pastor,
I'm CJ.
and this is Where Nerds Play. We're going to be talking about a very important subject for us because there's a debate.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about which one is the greatest Spider-Man out of the three major actors.
Now, I have very strong opinions as to who I think is the best, and so does CJ. We've talked a lot about it off camera, and we've made a couple of notes to kind of remember why we feel the way that we feel now, especially since the camera's rolling. So, first, I just want to cover the fact that I think we can agree on the fact that none of the three major roles that we're going to discuss, which is Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, or Tom Holland, are inherently bad. At least I don't feel that way. Oh, I guess CJ does.
I'm just kidding.
But I feel like they each represent a different Spider-Man, a very different Spider-Man, a very different demographic for Spider-Man fans. And there's a lot to take away from each portrayal. I just wanted to put that out there. Before we begin, we're not going to be at least I know I'm not going to be bashing any of the portrayals in this episode.
No, neither am I.
So where do you want to start off at? Just from the top?
Well, I'll just say up front, let's say where our space stance is. So what do you think?
For me, I thought about it for a while. I think objectively, in my own mind, I guess this is still an opinion, but I try to be as objective as possible. And I just feel like Tobey Maguire encompassed the Spider-Man that I grew up with and the Spider-Man that I fell in love with the best or the most accurate. And there could be, like I said, there could be a bias there. I haven't really tried to figure out why, because I did enjoy the other two actors and what they gave to the role. But for me, it would be Tobey Maguire if I was asked which is the best out of the three.
I think it's pretty cut and dry that Tom Holland is the best person to portray both Spider-Man and Peter Parker. On the other side of that, and I think this might be a common sentiment, I feel like Tobey Maguire is a better Peter Parker, not necessarily than Tom Holland, but just in general. And then Andrew Garfield is a better Spider-Man. Yes, it's one character, but I feel like Tom Holland especially encompasses that entire role the best, as opposed to sort of pseudo persona, second persona.
That's interesting because I actually never even took that into account whenever we were making this, the preparations for this episode. I just thought of them as pretty much the same, I guess, as opposed to when I normally think of like Batman, for example, Bruce Wayne and then Batman. But because Peter Parker doesn't really have that much of an impact in the movies comparatively to like Spider-Man. When Spider-Man's on screen, it's when all the action's happening. When Peter's on screen is like when all the drama and stuff is happening, which is fine. I'm not saying that's bad, but I do agree with the fact that Tobey Maguire, and that's one of the reasons why I picked him, portrayed the best Peter Parker out of the three of them. But I didn't make that my reasoning for picking him overall. So I'm actually glad that you pointed that out because I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so like basically you got to keep in mind when we're talking about Spider-Man, especially in the comics and the movies and the animated series, he's got two major struggles that are pretty continuous throughout all of his stories. One of which is struggling almost to prove himself and coming up to the challenge, rising up to the challenge, I should say. The other side is usually struggling financially in his love life with Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy or whoever it may be at that time. It's like the real person struggles and how he balances it with being a superhero. And it's almost like every single story you have, that is such a huge part of it. So you need a good Peter Parker.
Oh, definitely. And that's, I guess, without having thought of it that way, just the scene with how Tobey Maguire Spider-Man gets bitten and, laying out all the groundwork for that and pretty much, kind of like we all knew that going into it, we were going to see that. We were going to see him go from normal guy to Spider-Man. For me, I feel like it's a very simple scene. It's a very simple, event. And when I close my eyes, I think of Spider-Man. I remember the Tobey Maguire one of him, in the middle of taking a photograph, getting the spider landing on his hand and getting bitten and just waking up completely different. I for the life of me, I can't remember. I know we didn't get one with Tom Holland, but I can't remember the Andrew Garfield one at all.
I think he got bit on like the back of the neck, and he hits it off, and then looks at her or something. It's been a while since I've seen that.
It's been a long time. We for schedule because of scheduling. Originally, I wanted to sit down and rewatch, especially the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, to kind of be a little bit more, I want to say, like impartial to the facts and my opinions, I should say, on everything. But I felt like I could go and just like read the Wikipedia plot and remember like certain plot points that may not have stuck out to me as easily as the other two. But I just wanted to touch on if you don't have anything else to say in the preliminary arguments, I should say.
No, I guess we should just go ahead and get into each series. So if you want to start with like the Sam Raimi movies, we can go into that.
So before I get into all the details, like I'm partial because I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, and when I was a kid, I had no idea that the guy who directed Spider-Man was the same guy who directed the Evil Dead movies and the Army of Darkness
and upcoming the new Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah, which I'm super stoked for that. But I had no idea. So I had no expectations, no standards or anything like that. I remember that the visuals were really, really well done. It was a mixture of CGI, especially in the second one. But the first one was pretty much all practical for the most part. And I think puppets and stuff were used. But a lot of that gets, people chalk it up to like being campy and stuff like that. But I don't know. I'm super partial to that one. I have like some pros and cons written down. So for the pros, I said that the nostalgia factor, which I think we could all agree on.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's honestly, I think the best thing it's got going for it.
But yeah, other than that, like I say, one of my bigger arguments, if I ever get into a debate with someone or with a friend or whatever, is that it paved the way, at least to some degree. It paved the way for comic book movies.
And I could agree with that.
Yeah, because we had our Blade and Blade before it, and the X-Men movies before that. But there was something about Spider-Man that made it to where somebody could wear a unitard and a mask and run around, New York City of all places, saving people, and we believed it. We were entertained by it as far as the live action was concerned. Another thing was how relatable Tobey Maguire's portrayal of Peter Parker was. Like when he was in school with Flash and stuff, I just felt like if you were a kid who grew up with a crush and you felt like you were leagues away from that person and, couldn't attain it at all. And you just felt like you were just this, fly on the wall, so to speak, that was just trying to like not get squished. I feel like, the opening scene with him trying to get the bus and
pizza time.
Yeah. I mean, like just him trying to get on the bus and getting tripped and, and then eventually when he gets his powers and stuff and just puts Flash Thompson, on his derriere, for lack of a better, I'm not trying to get demonetized here, but yeah, I felt like he was really relatable. I also felt like the New York aspect of the movie. I haven't done research to see if it was like one of those movie magic tricks where they're like, let's film in LA and let's show that it's New York. I think they shot some of it on location, if I'm not mistaken. But if they didn't, it felt like it was in New York City. And I really enjoyed that. It felt like a New York movie. Like I remember scenes with the pizza man where he fires him and he's just like, you're fired, like that, just that. The words "you're fired" are very much New York, and I could say that because I'm from there. I'm not just trying to talk bad about the state, but anyway. And I think the one of the bigger plot points was that the secondary or even background characters were so well done and left such quotable lines and stuff, like Aunt May and Uncle Ben. We didn't get much Uncle Ben, but the Aunt May lines were super, super like powerful.
I don't know about that part. I felt like Aunt May and Uncle Ben not so much Uncle Ben, but Aunt May in that movie is almost rather forgettable. It's just, in my opinion, it wasn't that impactful. I can't name a single line.
Well, there's that scene in the second one where Peter's having that conflict where he's like, should I be Spider-Man or go after the woman I love? Yep. And, she's like gathering all the stuff and the neighborhood boy comes and, she's like, oh, I gave him all your comic books. And he's like, well, what would you do or something? And she's like, there's a hero in all of us. Like that whole speech is just so powerful that it actually turns the corner for Peter's, and like, you know what? I'm going to be Spider-Man again. And I could be both. There could be a balance and all that kind of thing. But there were some cons, and I'm trying not to speed through it, but there is so much to cover. But there are some cons for me as far as the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man goes. And that is the third movie. That movie was a god-awful. I'm sorry that it is, it was part of a trilogy, but I wrote down here that the movie was weak. It was a terrible Venom, and they underutilized Gwen Stacy, which is probably the most objective con because Gwen Stacy did come before Mary Jane, and they had every opportunity to kind of even make it to where maybe she didn't have to be with Peter. They could have like skipped that, but still had that history, and it just fell flat. Bryce Dallas Howard as Gwen Stacy is forgettable at best. And they tried to cram too much into that movie. You know, you had like 4 or 5 different villains. The Sandman was perfect. It was very well done, and it looked great. The portrayal was great. I even liked what they did when they decided to retcon, I guess, the fact that he was involved in Uncle Ben's death. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. But then you throw in Venom and you throw in Goblin, it's just too convoluted.
And it wasn't even the Green Goblin, right? It was Harry. Which, speaking of, out of like all those movies together, right? The most, I think, memorable / iconic characters have got to be Spider-Man, of course. That kind of goes without saying. Mary Jane. It's, you know, she's obviously the love interest throughout all the movies, and then Gwen Stacy's, like you said, forgettable. Harry Osborne was a pretty good character, and then Green Goblin. Green Goblin was awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Doc Ock was pretty cool too. I don't think he's up on the same level, but I thought he was pretty awesome.
I don't know. I feel like Doc Ock was a very like pivotal role. I know that there's a lot of villains that Spider-Man has that are just straight up villains. Like they come through, they wreck stuff, and then they leave. But like the character of Norman Osborn in the Sam Raimi universe was almost, I mean, he lasted throughout all 3 movies, even though he died in the first one.
In a way, yeah.
You know, and they just, Willem Dafoe, that role was just like made for him. You know, that "Avenge Me" line, which I don't want to yell into the mic, but you know, that, of course, what he does to Baynard, I think is his name, was the butler, and then the guy that worked for him in the lab when he was trying to tell him, listen, we're not up to that yet, and he pretty much juiced himself up and killed the guy. It was such a relatable like villain for Spider-Man, where it's like he found out he's his, you know, best friend's dad, and he still had to do the right thing. So I could go on and on as to why the Tobey Maguire movies are up there with me. So I don't want to seem any more biased than I probably already have.
Yeah, so I know our focus here is on Spider-Man as a character as opposed to the movies. That being said, I'm going to trail off a little bit here and talk about representation of major characters. I think out of kind of all the sources of media we have, aside from the comic books, the best Aunt May has got to be from the PS4 game.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Along with the best Norman Osborn.
I would say so. I definitely agree with that.
That being said, the best Harry and did I say Norman Osborn from the game?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't mean to say Norman Osborn. I meant Doc Ock. The best. Oh. Yeah.
Well, for me, I would say, because I remember Norman Osborn being not that the Roto guy, the Roto Capture guy was an actor. I mean, I know him from like Rush Hour and stuff, but I liked that he wasn't like crazy from the start. He was just a businessman that, you know, you can tell eventually becomes the Green Goblin.
Well, yeah, neither was Willem Dafoe.
True.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say is I think the best representation of Norman Osborn and Harry Osborn were from the Tobey Maguire movies.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Whereas, like I said, Otto and May were best in the video games. So that does give it some credit. But, like, you know, Dr. Octopus in the second Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, he was cool. He was interesting. It showed that kind of separation of, like, he's not really a bad guy, but he's kind of going crazy. Or, you know, trying to help himself out in a way. That was awesome. But you really got to see in the video game that development and how he got there.
Right. And how it was basically just a person who had all the great intentions of trying to change the world and trying to better mankind, but we're all human at the end of the day, and too much power, there has to be a balance. So I totally get it.
Yeah, whereas same thing with Aunt May is like, I have played through that game 4 times.
Oh, same.
I don't think I have finished that game without crying.
Dude, there's TikToks. There's people that cosplay Spider-Man, and they do that. They do the soundbite where she's, you know, for those of you, spoiler alert, definitely click off now if you haven't played Amazing Spider-Man or the Spider-Man game for PS4. But there's a moment where Aunt May is in the hospital, and she finds out that Peter is Spider-Man, and that scene has been recreated and cosplayed and performed and sketched and everything, that it's always impactful, whether it's the video game or someone who is a dedicated cosplayer recreating that moment. I thought that game, I still do, I think that game is probably the best Spider-Man storyline that we've gotten.
It might be. Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Because it was just so well rounded, and
Yeah.
everything seemed like it was pre-planned. It wasn't just like a movie can be very difficult, and I'm well aware of that. Things can happen, accidents and reshoots and all that, and actors are just or producers and directors are just having left to pick up the pieces. But with a video game, it's a lot easier because everything is CGI. So.
Yep.
Maybe that's why it's so perfect. Let us know in the comments. We're always, wanting to hear other people's opinions. At least I know I am, because I'm very much, I like to be an objective person when it comes to getting into arguments about stuff that we all love. So that's what this is about.
Yeah, and I know I'm still kind of staying off topic just a little bit longer, but not only at the Aunt May scene do I usually cry, but also the final Dr. Octopus scene.
Oh, man.
When he beats him, Spider-Man beats him, and he's like, "You're not going to help me, Peter." And then he said, "I can reveal your identity." Obviously, you could assume that he doesn't, at least, but it shows that, he's trying to take advantage of Peter's, friendship with him. His, almost a familial connection. Like,
yeah.
he might as well be a father figure because he doesn't really have one anymore. But I'll move on from that. Like I said, don't want to spend too much on that. Basically, my point in that was to go back to the original Spider-Man trilogy and just say that the bonus was it did have two very iconic characters, some of the best representations in my opinion, Norman and Harry Osborn.
Oh, yeah. And you definitely can tell that they were father and son. You could tell that, all he wanted was to make his dad proud. And you could see that right after high school, it became like he wasn't, just a normal kid who had a rich dad. He became like, I have all this inheritance. I have all this power. And he started dictating stuff. And during the Doc Ock scene where, he's like, "Oh, I gave you this or whatever. I gave you a small fortune," or something like that, he says. And you could just see that he's still a kid who's trying to grow up. And I think James Franco I think that separated him from even though he eventually ended up going back into the stoner movie kind of stuff, but it took him away from like the freaks and geeks, like the stoner high school kid. And it put him still in high school, but it made him like an actor, like a real actor, in my opinion. But
I would say he was one of the best actors in the trilogy.
Oh, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Yeah. I think there's a reason why they were contemplating at one point not only bringing back J.K. Simmons, but bringing back James Franco as Harry.
They need to for the next Spider-Man movie.
Right. But I mean, we could, like I said, I know I could talk about the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi movies forever. I think we both talked enough about that one. We can move on to Andrew Garfield, unless you have something else to say.
I guess I'll just say, kind of to sum it up from my point of view, is, those movies will always have a place in my heart, and I will always go back and watch them and not have any reservations about doing it. I watch them almost from a comedic perspective to some degree, out of a nostalgic perspective, and out of an appreciation for Spider-Man. So like I said, they always have a spot in my heart. However, I don't think they're particularly good movies. I mean,
and I know you way more than the viewers do, but yeah. I can definitely see the kind of fan that you are, because you have reasons, like your point in saying, and I hate to keep bringing DC into a Marvel conversation, but you said very much so, and you feel very much strongly about the fact that the Dark Knight movies or the Christopher Nolan movies are not very good movies.
They're horrible.
I've heard that many times by people that objectively go in, or they say they objectively go in to see these movies, and they're like, well, the movie was terrible, it was over dramatized, it was too dark or whatever. And then there's people that, like you, who made valid points, or at least arguments that I consider to be valid and objective, which is, if you take Batman out, it's still a great movie. So
yeah,
you don't.
I was kidding about horrible. They're actually pretty good movies, just despite Batman being in them.
But I mean, I people, you like what you like, and I'm not trying to play, both sides against the middle here, but I do understand the campiness of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. I know that a lot of it was homages to what he did, which was Evil Dead. I mean, that scene in Spider-Man 2 with when Doc Ock wakes up and the nurse is like screaming, or when his wife is like screaming and the glass is coming at her, it turns into a horror movie for a split second. That is just Sam Raimi to a T, and I get that.
So I've never seen Evil Dead.
What?
Yeah, so we got more videos.
So the perfect part about this podcast, if you guys watched episode 1, I know we're only in the second episode, but this is like, I guess, the part of the podcast where CJ reveals that he hasn't seen a movie that I assumed he's seen, and you guys will eventually see it over on another series on the channel called Real Reactions. So there you go.
I still don't know how you haven't seen Back to the Future, though. I finally get to be on the other side. and show him Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Me and his wife are super excited for him to see Back to the Future.
I'm really excited as well because I know all of the references and I just don't know the substance or, I'm not tied to the characters because I haven't seen it. So we'll definitely get to that.
All right. Well, yeah. So I'd say let's go ahead and jump into The Amazing Spider-Man.
So The Amazing Spider-Man, I didn't cover this with Tobey Maguire. I'll just get it out of the way. The budget for the first movie was
Amazing or the original?
For the original. The budget for the first one was $130 million, and it made right around $825 million. Mm-hmm. So that is just for the first one, for Spider-Man 1, so not counting 2 or 3. Now, Andrew Garfield doesn't have a trilogy. It just has 2 movies, which is one of the reasons why I only chose to use the first movie to kind of keep it fair. The budget was $200 to $230 million, and it earned upwards of $758 million. Now, in my opinion, I think a lot, if not part of the reason why it made so much money is because Spider-Man was already something that we were used to seeing on the big screen.
Yeah. And are you looking at box office profits?
I believe so.
Yeah, so box office profits are obviously going to be super different. That's going to be initial success. So people were just coming off of, it's 2012. So people were coming off of, we just had these 3 Spider-Man movies, and people did have I think a generally positive view of them because of what they were for the time. Mm-hmm. And now the MCU's out. Sony's doing their own thing. It's made to look really big. It has a good budget. It's got Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield, 2 huge names. And you got to kind of expect a lot out of it. And what we had in the first one was the Lizard as the villain, right?
Yeah, the Lizard.
Dr. Kirk Connors. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the name of the actor.
I can't remember his name either.
Yeah, but anyways, it was a pretty big looking movie.
He was the guy from Little Nicky, the brother. Yeah,
really.
Uh-huh.
I love that movie.
The one with the British accent.
I don't see it, but I'll have to compare it later.
I'm pretty sure it was him.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, essentially, I feel like that's why the box office, the money gained,
yeah,
was as high as it was.
Right. I mean, with that aside, though, I think the movie still had a lot of pros. I think,
for sure.
The fact that his sarcasm. I think the Spider-Man sarcasm. Yeah, he nailed it. I mean, I'm used to seeing even in the video games like Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire had a little bit of it in the first one with the bone saw scene where he's like, "Oh, did your husband make it for you?" So he had a little bit of that. But Andrew Garfield, that scene, I think he even used it in the trailer when he's just like, "Oh, small knives, how did you know? My only weakness."
Dude, that might have been my favorite scene out of those 2 movies.
I think that scene, and when he's learning that he's Spider-Man and he's like jumping off the roof and playing with the skateboard and all that, because that's the skater Spider-Man, which is another pro. I think he nailed that interpretation of Spider-Man. To me, Andrew Garfield is like the college Spider-Man, and at least for me, that's how I look at it. And then, or not Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire is the college Spider-Man, and then Andrew Garfield is very much the high school Spider-Man.
But that's almost what made it awkward, because Spider-Man, I think, is best represented when he's gaining his powers as a high school student.
Right.
Because he's young. He doesn't have like a full understanding of everything. He's a smart kid, but like he doesn't understand the real world yet. And I feel like they kind of missed the mark in the original movies because of that. They're putting him in a high school situation, and you're missing some of his struggles. Yeah, he's struggling with rent, but like...
But I mean... And this is something that I don't think I touched on, and if I did, I didn't do it enough, but Tobey Maguire was a lot older than high school. So was Kirsten Dunst and everyone, and James Franco and them. But the fact that when they graduated, I forget which movie. I think it's the end of the first one.
That was the first one.
Yeah. They graduate and they're in college in the second one, and it just doesn't feel any different. It just feels like they put the high school characters in a college setting. So with Andrew Garfield, he very much felt like a high schooler. Just the scenes that he had with Emma Stone, with Gwen Stacy, and the fact that she was still living at home, and it kind of, I don't know, it just felt more like a high school setting, and I really liked that. I thought that was something that the movie had going for it. And the fact, speaking of Gwen Stacy, they used her more accurately and just more overall. Yeah. She was not utilized at all, hardly, in the Raimi trilogy. He went straight into the Mary Jane arc, and it's fine. I mean, that's what, if you think of the cartoon series, Mary Jane is MJ. That's who he keeps talking about. So the Gwen Stacy thing is pretty much for people who are diehard fans, who read the comic books and stuff. And I think that their chemistry, which eventually led to a real-life romance between the two of them, Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield, I thought that was great. I thought the chemistry was amazing.
Oh, for sure. And kind of my overall opinion of the Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, is I feel like the acting was significantly better. The script was significantly better. Obviously, the CGI looks way cooler. But I feel like the story was sort of two-dimensional. I feel like they didn't go deep and they didn't really hit enough almost emotionally. They didn't really tell a significant story. There was interesting plots and there was deep moments with the whole Gwen Stacy's father. I can't remember what his name was. Captain Stacy, but like what his first name was. But the whole part where he's like, promise me you'll leave my daughter out of it type thing. And it shows this conflict that he's having with her. And then in the second movie, when it shows the death of Gwen Stacy, and that was probably the most impactful moment aside from maybe her father dying. But they showed a different version of it as opposed to what happened in the comics. Because in the comics, what happened was almost a meld of what happens in, I want to say it was Spider-Man 1 with Tobey Maguire and the Amazing Spider-Man 2, where the Green Goblin throws a bus and Mary Jane off.
Right.
Instead of Mary Jane.
And Peter has to choose.
Yeah, exactly. And he, unfortunately, was not able to save her. Same essential thing happens, but just not in that, like, tower or whatever they were in.
Right. Now, I do like, though, speaking of that scene, since we're on the subject, just the visual representation of that scene.
Oh, yeah.
I remember it vividly when he throws, the web out, you actually see it go down and it turns into like a hand.
Yeah.
And it tries to grab her hand. And the fact that obviously it's a Spider-Man movie, and I think they expected certain, a large amount of kids to go in and watch it. They didn't want to show something as horrific as what ended up happening. They kind of used slow motion and they kind of used like cuts and stuff to kind of make it less dramatic. But in the comics, if memory serves, it unfortunately, inadvertently, I guess is the word, it is Peter's fault that she dies because he grabs her leg and the inertia of it or whatever causes a whiplash and she just snaps her neck. She never really hits the ground. But
I don't think she did in Spider-Man, the movie either.
I
think it was like because she got it right in like the abdominal area, so like cracked her spine, I suppose.
Yeah. So I'm glad that they left her death not only in the movie but as much of an accurate portrayal as they could have, I guess, without changing the script and adding Green Goblin just for that scene. But I do. One thing, I don't know if you thought about it or not, but in mulling over in preparation for this episode, the fact that we got to see Peter's parents, at least his dad, like the background of his dad, it was a little different because I think in the comics, Peter's parents are like paramilitary or like spies or something like that, and in the movie they were just like scientists that just got caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time and created the spider that eventually bit Peter, which I think that's pretty cool. It's a very unique thing. I'm not sure where the inspiration came from, but I do enjoy that. And it just added a backstory, the thing with the train and having that secret train tunnel and everything in New York where Peter had to like follow the satchel and all that stuff. I thought that was really cool. It added a little bit of depth because for me, Uncle Ben, even though he's played by someone as great as Martin Sheen, he just fell flat, man. Like I just did not feel for that Uncle Ben at all.
I actually kind of liked him.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think he was, I think he was better than, well, I don't know. I think he was on par with the first one, probably. I think they're both pretty good.
I mean, we don't get much of Uncle Ben anyway.
Exactly.
But I don't know. I felt like he was like...
Well, in Amazing Spider-Man, you get more of him because he's around for most of the movie, is he not?
Yeah. He's around. He's like utilized, I guess, a little bit more. But I guess that's why he just came off as like, I guess, a grumpy guy who didn't want Peter around. That's just how I remember him. And again,
I don't think so. But
I haven't seen the movies in a while, but I did enjoy Sally Field. Of course, I love Sally Field.
Did she play Aunt May?
Yeah, she did.
Okay, yeah.
And because that way we got, and it's funny, as we progress through the Spider-Man movies, we progressively get a younger Aunt May.
Yeah, the next one it's going to be a toddler playing Spider-Man and a teenager playing Aunt May.
Yeah, it'll be like a Bulma Goku situation.
Basically.
But
it's just going to be Bulma and Goku.
But as far as like the cons for the Amazing Spider-Man movies, it really falls on the first one. I didn't care for the fact that Harry Osborne just seemed like a psycho from the start.
I think that was another big negative was the villains. Now, I think the Lizard was decent.
Oh, yeah, I like the Lizard. I can't remember. Harry Osborn doesn't show up until the second one, right? I'm trying to remember.
I don't recall it when he originally pops up. I remember stuff about him. I can't remember which movie it was, but he just seemed not interesting. Like the whole time, both the first or whenever he's around.
Right.
Whereas like Dr. Connors was super cool, I thought, and Jamie Foxx, Electro, was just goofy.
It was goofy. They pretty much,
and the whole thing that they showed him. Like the portrayal of it, the physical portrayal looked goofy too. I mean, somebody like Jamie Foxx, I mean, those of you who enjoy cinema know, I mean, look at him in Baby Driver, look at him in Django. I mean, he is so well versed. He can sing, he can do all these type of things. And he just looked like someone who was muffled and muted. That might be his worst role.
Definitely. I think it hands down 100%. The worst looking role. You know, they had all the CG and stuff as far as comparing it to the first trilogy, and it didn't work. And then on top of that, my biggest, which I'm glad they fixed it, but my biggest problem with the Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans are that first movie, that suit was god awful.
You think so?
I hated it. I hated the fact that he was wearing like Nikes and he had yellow eyes. Like his eyes were straight up yellow, and it looked so bad. Like it in the cover, like whenever I saw the posters and the movie advertisements, I was like, okay, cool, it looks awesome. Then I saw it in the movie, and I was like, oh my god, this is. And then you see him in the second one.
Yeah,
the second one looked amazing, but by far better than probably all of them. That's just how I
recall him looking too. I guess kind of. These are like kids' costumes for the most part.
Yeah, like I hated those yellow eyes, man, and the sneakers.
I can't even remember what you're talking about. I'm trying to take a look at it.
And I think his gloves were kind of off too. He had like two of the fingers were blue and the other ones were red. And I have some sort of OCD because I like things to match and be symmetrical.
Yeah.
And it just didn't. It just left me feeling like super cringe. And then when he comes back in the second one, it was like a 180. I loved everything about the second suit. The eyes were huge. I loved it.
Maybe part of it is that I'm colorblind. I don't know. But
probably.
I know when I was younger and I watched like the original Spider-Man movies, I thought they were awesome. How it has like the external webbing on top of it and like it's textured. I thought that was cool.
Oh yeah.
Going back now and watching it, I hate the first costume.
Really?
Oh yeah, I do not like it at all. I like the second one way better. I think the second one, the Amazing Spider-Man one, is my favorite out of the three.
I think it is too. I think the one from the second one is my favorite. The second Amazing Spider-Man. But I will say that there is a cult following at the very least for the first one, the first suit, because the petition of making it I think it's the latest DLC at the time when the first game for PS4 was out.
And they did add it eventually.
Yeah, we all got it. We got the Raimi suit. And I know I played through the game wearing only the Raimi suit because I liked it, so much. But I was always waiting for them to put on the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit because I would have worn that the whole time. But I didn't have too many negative things. I remember a scene, I can't remember which one it is, if it's the first or the second, where Peter is about to get called off to do something, and him and Mary Jane are they're propped up against one of the trees in the city, because New York City has like actual trees that grow from the concrete. And they're like leaned up against one, and he has like his arm over her, and he's like talking about how they're going to be together and everything. And then all of a sudden, like police and sirens just go by, and he has to like leave. And I always remember that because I remember dating girls and when I was, living in New York, and how we would have either to go home because of curfew or go to school or go to work. And that scene just brings me back to my childhood or my adolescent hood, I guess. And I don't know, it just has a warm place in my heart. But as far as the cons go, they're pretty significant, but they're not as much as I thought in writing this for this video.
I think the biggest drawback of the movies, the most important one, is the villains and how they fall kind of flat. And then on top of that, I think he was a good actor in the movie. It's just almost that he was too serious as Spider-Man. He had his quips here and there, but it was few and far between. Like the whole knife thing, it was almost always at the beginning of the. I think it was only really at the beginning of the first movie, and it just kind of died out, and he got just way too serious.
Yeah, and like, I used to make fun of the scene because we know it's not real, but and we know it's very sad. I don't cancel me, but comparatively, like Peter losing Uncle Ben and or not Peter, Andrew, Tobey Maguire, sorry.
Oh, that crying.
Yeah, him losing Uncle Ben, and then Andrew Garfield losing Uncle Ben. It was different. I mean, I teased at him, like I was like, Uncle Ben, because he has like this like really nasally cry to him.
To
Andrew Garfield.
Oh, that was not even close to as bad as Toby's.
Well,
Toby's is horrible.
Toby's gets memed all the time, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
He has like his eyes get all bulgy and stuff.
Yeah, put that on. Put a little picture of it right here.
of Toby. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Unless you have anything else to say. I mean, these movies kind of just fell flat. I mean,
I'm ready for Tom Holland.
You're ready for Tom Holland? I'm ready for you to talk about Tom Holland because I don't want to offend you, but I might anyway. But anyway, yeah, as far as like Andrew Garfield goes, let us know in the comments. I don't want this movie to feel forgotten because it kind of does in my friend circle and stuff. I know for me.
Yeah.
And if you guys are fans of it, let us know in the comments. Like, let us know that, why you like it. Let us know if you don't agree with us, especially with any of these, but with, Andrew Garfield, because I feel like it gets like swept under the rug and it's almost like it doesn't exist because no one talks about it. The Tobey Maguire movies have the nostalgia that keeps it alive, and then it also has Sam Raimi element, and then of course the Tom Holland one has the fact that the entire MCU is behind them. But enough about that. Just let us know in the comments, and we're gonna move on to your favorite Spider-Man.
Tom Holland, the greatest to ever do it. So, very simply put, right off the bat, the smallest thing that contributes to this is he is the only one. Not only is he not American, but he was the only one to do an accent from New York.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to agree with that because apart from the knife scene that Toby has not a single
exactly
moment.
No, it's non-existent.
But as far as the Andrew Garfield movies, that scene with the knife, he does have a little bit of a Queen's accent.
Yeah, well, when he goes in the sub shop and like Tom Holland says, "Can you smash it all down or smush it all down?" And like the whole time though, he has that accent. And
yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's most difficult for him to do it, especially not being an American at all.
Right.
And he's got like a very British accent, and he's able to conduct it. And I want to say Andrew Garfield's British too, actually.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Yeah. He just does a normal like generic American accent, I guess.
And the fact that I think of all three, well, definitely including Toby, but he's the youngest one. So
yeah, which I think portrays the character a lot better.
But it's also very impressive that such a young, in real life, such a young actor can nail an accent from a country he's not,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but before we keep going, just to not let the Tom Holland movies be the only ones we don't cover, the budget for the first one was $175 million, and it earned...
Really?
Yeah.
So less than the Andrew Garfield one.
Yeah. And it earned $880 million.
Which is about on par for the first movie, right?
It actually made $55 million more than the first one.
Than the Tobey Maguire?
Mm-hmm.
And what about Andrew Garfield?
Andrew Garfield made just under $758 million.
So, I mean, they're all pretty close when you're talking in those terms, right? As far as $1 million movies, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
$100 million movies, whatever we want to say. They're all fairly close, which is kind of surprising, especially the Tobey Maguire one being as close to Tom Holland as it is.
I mean, I don't have anything negative to say about Tom Holland per se. We talked about it in the previous episode because it had to do with the MCU, and I just didn't like the fact that he was a Iron Man Jr. And I hate saying that because I feel like it's, been said a million times and sounds very bandwagony, I guess, of me saying that, but it definitely felt like and you covered it too. I mean,
yeah. I mean, my biggest problem with the Tom Holland Spider-Man, and I do have problems with it, it's not so much him, and that's why I still say he's at the top of all of them. I don't think that his stories are the best necessarily. They're pretty good, but my big problem is that they totally skip over his introduction, and I feel like that is such an integral part of who he is. So I know why they did it. You're coming off 2 Spider-Man trilogies, or 1 trilogy, 1
right,
2 movie series, whatever, and they both just covered it. So it's like, hey, do we really want to do this again? So his introduction was really quick, in Civil War. Here he is. You didn't get to see him build his own gadgets, which is a huge part of him. You didn't get to see him, design his own suit, huge part. You didn't get to see what made him Spider-Man, huge part. And I feel like that's such a big miss. Another thing is, like you said, Iron Man Jr., that's not great. Like, it's cool, but it is what it is. And then instead of the whole Uncle Ben situation, his big loss had to be Tony Stark.
Yeah. Because it totally skips over the Uncle Ben, thing. I think, is it Marissa or Melissa Tomei?
Marissa
Tomei.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
Gorgeous woman.
Oh yeah, she's very, very beautiful. She's been in many other movies that I've watched. Like I know she was
My Cousin Vinny
in The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke, which also he played Whiplash from the MCU. It's kind of hard. I say this all the time. It's kind of hard to see actors and actresses that have not been in the MCU, but I did like the humor. I think the humor in the Holland movies was a little bit more self-aware. It wasn't as campy.
Yeah.
You know, at the very end when she finds out that he's Spider-Man and she's like, what the, it's
I love that.
so funny. The music, and before we get too deep into it, I have a very unpopular opinion, I think, as far as like my friends go, at least. And that is that I had no problem with the change in the storyline. I know you probably are one that doesn't really care for it. The fact that MJ is not Mary Jane, it's that for something else.
Shell something, yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that, is it Ted?
Ned.
Ned, sorry.
Yeah.
Ned.
I was like, who the fuck's
Ned, sorry, yeah. Ned is, his, like, the man in the chair and everything, and the fact that there is no, like, real dynamic between him and, like, Flash. Flash is just like a common bully who kind of keeps his distance and just verbally insults him.
He's like a modern bully.
Yeah. And then you have like the other like big difference is the fact that there's no like nothing ties him to New York. He just seems like a kid who is just in New York because he's in school, and it just doesn't show enough New York. And I think that's the biggest weakness, even if you talk about both of them, is that like he's not a neighborhood Spider-Man. He's like going off. Both movies take place with him not being really in New York.
Well, the first one does.
I mean, the first one does, but like
he's not. He's in New York.
Yeah, but he's not. He's been like he's like in like upstate New York.
Okay,
like he's very much not in the city where the Bugle would be, or even his apartment or whatever. Even though he still lives with Aunt May, it's almost like, and I don't feel this way anymore. But I think it's worth to say that when I first saw Homecoming, I almost thought he was too young to be Spider-Man because I just didn't think that he was ready to move out on his own, and I was ready to see that by the time the second movie rolled around. But then I had to remind myself that he probably was a freshman in the first one and then a sophomore in the second one.
Maybe about there, yeah.
Yeah, because I can't imagine him being even a junior in any of the movies because he's just not even the actor, but just the tone felt like he was so much younger.
Too young, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I can kind of see that. I feel like you said, Ned, I do not like Ned as a character. I like the dynamic between the two of them. I don't like Ned. I wish he wasn't in the movie. I wish he was Harry Osborne.
Okay. I mean, I could see that. But I could also understand why they went that route just because it was different. And if they chose not to do the origin story, might as well do something else that was different. But it didn't bother me as much. I think it's just because for me, I go see a movie about Spider-Man and I don't care what they do as long as they don't like do what Shyamalan did to Avatar, which is completely change everything.
Good Lord.
Yeah. I pretty much give everything a chance is what I'm getting at. And it didn't bother me as much, but I can definitely appreciate why it would. And the fact that he just was this literally made up character. I think I heard someone say that it was based off of like the Spectacular Spider-Man or the Sensational Spider-Man or something like that.
I've heard people say he's supposed to be Ned Leeds, but Ned Leeds is such a different character. The other side is Michelle. Just don't call her MJ, and I'm cool with it. I hate that they're trying to pass it off and say they're basically saying there's not going to be an MJ.
I agree with that 100%.
Which I don't like that.
Right.
I'm cool with her as a character. I didn't like her in the first movie. I loved her in the second movie. How she puts on this like facade of being like, oh, I'm a badass. I'm too cool for school and all that stuff. And then she has that kind of soft side, and she actually has like a thing for Peter. I love that. They didn't really show it in the first movie. They showed him like with this girl, the Vulture's daughter,
right? And
she's like the popular girl. She was basically the Mary Jane of the movie.
Yeah, and for the longest time, I thought she was.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and I was cool with that. Even I was just like, oh, this is just different. Okay, but why are you playing the same character essentially, just with a different name? And then at the end of the first movie, she goes, "Oh, I'm MJ." I'm like, "Oh God, please don't do this."
Yeah.
And then second movie, like I said, I love the character. I just wish it was just Michelle, not MJ.
Now, hear me out. Does it feel for you like they kind of went on like a meta homage, maybe like how they did with WandaVision, where we got to see the Quicksilver that we got? We all thought it was going to be how they tied together the acquisition of Foxx, and you were like, oh, it just turned out to be a dick joke. To you, did it feel that way? The fact that she was like, oh, hi, I'm MJ, in a way of like, MJ exists, and you're going to hear him say MJ, but it's not Mary Jane.
I think you need to understand how much I hated the fact that they used him as a dick joke.
Sorry for opening up old wounds, man.
That has got to be the biggest mistake in the MCU, in my opinion. I hated that with a passion. When now I'm not a huge fan of the X-Men movies or X-Men really in general.
Gotcha.
I like them, I appreciate them, but they're not at the top of my list. But the best thing that come out of those movies, in my opinion, is Evan Peters as Quicksilver.
Wow. Okay.
I loved it. I loved every scene with him in it. I loved especially the slow motion scenes, right?
So not even Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, right?
Honestly, I feel like he's overhyped.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean he's cool, but people talk about him as like one of the perfect castings. Like they're putting him up there with Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. Not even close.
I think we are not friends anymore. It's my turn
That's
to say
fair.
that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. No, he's great, like I said, but I just don't feel like I do think he's overhyped. I don't think he's as good as people say he is because they put him on this high pedestal, and
I think
that almost ruins it a little bit for me.
And I think a lot of that goes with the fact that he's been, Wolverine for so many years.
It's like 2000, yeah.
Yeah, that it's just like you owe him something at some point. But at what point is that too much? And I get what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm biased because he's my favorite. But go ahead.
No, that's fair. Especially because Wolverine's your favorite character, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember what I was talking. Oh yeah, Evan Peters. So they put him in WandaVision, and we're getting way off track here, I know. But he shows up in WandaVision, and I have never had this reaction to any piece of cinema, TV show, anything. I stood up and started pacing. I wasn't ready to handle that.
Oh, I know, dude. And I think I covered this in the last episode when we talked about the MCU, that I was so upset that I did not film that reaction because I just got home, and I think it was because the previous episode had felt like a filler one to me. And I still didn't know where I stood on the whole WandaVision thing. I didn't know if I cared for it a whole lot or if I just was like, okay, I'll take it or leave it. And then I sat down and I watched it super leisure, calm down, no cameras rolling or nothing. And then that happens. And I was like, God dang it, dude. Yeah. I had such a reaction to that the camera could not have followed my reaction. I was so animated. And then I was like, well, that sucks. But I'm not going to try and recreate it in a fake reaction video because that's not fair,
I mean, I had a 10-minute response to that. Like, it literally like ruined my life for a moment. And I was so excited for Evan Peters in the MCU and how I was like, oh, they're going to make him Quicksilver. This is how they're going to cross over the two universes. And they're basically, my assumption was they're going to make all of the Fox movies canon and that they might bring over some actors here and there. It's their way to bring in Deadpool to some degree into the MCU, and then from that point down, from that point forward, it kind of just went downhill, the show for me. And I set my expectations way too high in the middle of the season, and none of them were met.
Yeah, and I know how that feels. I put it that way. I know how it feels to base something off of a really, really good use of something, at least as far as the reception goes, and then all of a sudden they just went left field with it. Yeah, and you're just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Which I get that.
Yeah, so like the first two episodes, and I'm sorry, we're talking Spider-Man, but I'm talking WandaVision now.
You're good.
The first two episodes, filler. I hated them. I had no interest in the show, but I felt like I had to watch it to get the full context of upcoming movies. Third episode, I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. Something interesting is happening. I think it was the fourth or the fifth that Evan Peters shows up. I want to say it was the fourth. Whatever the case may be. It was getting more interesting. He shows up. I get hyped. And then the next episode, he's around. He plays around a little bit. He's kind of being a dick, right?
Right.
And then it just goes downhill. Turns out he's a dick joke. And I was expecting Mephisto to show up. And I was like, the show could be redeemed because Mephisto could lead to Ghost Rider in the MCU. And I love Ghost Rider. And then it was just Agatha. Now, I expected Agatha, but I expected her to be serving Mephisto.
Right. I mean, again, let us know what you guys think. I've heard people say that the same thing you just said.
Yeah.
And I've also heard people say that, WandaVision sucked until Agatha. And then I've heard people say WandaVision sucked or WandaVision was great until Agatha.
No, I think she was awesome. It was just, I set my expectations way above her.
Gotcha. I don't know why I said that the way I did. But the main thing was that I've heard other people say, oh, I loved WandaVision until Agatha showed up. And then I was like, wait, what? Like, what, really?
No, I loved her. But like I said, I just expected Mephisto to be behind that.
Right, exactly. And that's the overarching thing that I think I'm not saying, Disney knows what they're doing, in my opinion. They kind of fix things. I mean, for me, as long as it's not Star Wars, but let's not get into that. Star Wars kind of had a roller coaster going on.
Kennedy is the devil.
But yeah, so back to Spider-Man.
Anyways, the reason we brought that up was Michelle. You were comparing the MJ thing to him, and I went on that long tirade because I hate it so much just to say, not even close. That reveal wasn't even close to the same level. It was more like a disappointment, you know?
Yeah.
Your mom says, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. That's how I felt.
Dude, that's rough. But yeah, I totally get that, man. And one detail about those movies that I don't want to forget, because we'll just get into another tirade, which, I mean, it's fine. We're nerds. That's what we do. But I really, really enjoyed, and I hope I don't get demonetized for this, but the part, dude, the freaking part with Flash, I believe it's in the second one.
Oh, are you talking about, I know exactly what you're talking about. Spider-Man, how he's so, yeah.
Yeah, where he's just like, they're looking on the TV or whatever, and Peter had just did his classic Spider-Man, like, oh, I got to be in two places at once. Let me try and like make it seem like I never left kind of thing. And then like Flash is like, yo, look at Spider-Man, man, he's so dope. And then Peter walks in, he's like, what up, dickwad? Like, that's my favorite part, dude. It made me laugh so hard because the delivery, obviously, that's my kind of humor. Like those of you that know me, the quips like that, I love that. It makes me laugh so hard. And the fact that we all know we're in on the joke in a different way, almost like, you know, was it Weird Al that was like, you know, I heard Harry say he wants Spider-Man dead, all but his buddy Pete he can trust.
Yeah, I think so.
It's so funny, you know, that kind of stuff is funny to me. But again, we talked a lot about the second one because Mysterio was such an interesting character in the way they did that. But I don't really have any problems with Tom Holland as Spider-Man, apart from the whole Iron Man Jr. thing. And I think that, not to say that, you know, I don't want Tony around, but the fact that Tony isn't around, we're going to see a different Spider-Man now. We're really going to see one.
We are owed that in a way.
I think so. I think, if memory serves, the movie ended very, very open. And they're definitely going to do something with Tom Holland that I don't think any of us were expecting, but we all wanted. And I think that's the best way to put it. This next movie and the next string of movies, whether it all leads into the multiverse or the multiverse is just part of the ride, I don't know where they're going to go with it. I'm sure that there's different things I can look up and do research, and I'm sure that you guys out there probably know the answer to this, but I am expecting it to be incredibly awesome, and I'm trying to keep it there and not go any higher, because I don't want to set myself up for disappointment.
Yeah. I guess all in all, just kind of wrapping up the Spider-Man movies, Tom Holland ones, the biggest hits for me were Tom Holland playing Spider-Man. I think he portrays the character really well. The two major villains we got so far, which are Mysterio and Vulture, have got to be the best representations of those two characters that we've gotten so far, like including the video game, which there wasn't Mysterio in there, but there was a Vulture. And then hopefully we'll finally get a Sinister Six soon. We'll see.
Oh, man.
So we'll see. And then the biggest miss, like I said before, is kind of skipping his origin and then, like you said, making the whole Iron Man Jr. And it kind of decreases his credit to some degree because he's not building his own stuff. He just has his skill, which his skill's awesome, but when you couple it with his mind, it's just so much cooler. And I feel like the movie's kind of missed to some degree showing off his capability in his mind. It probably shows it off better than the other two movies, but still not enough.
Yeah, you get that scene where he comes home and he has like a VCR that he's trying to like turn into, and he has his computer and all that stuff. But yeah, I do like that it touched on his eyes and how he had to account for that in his suit, that he had to make like the goggles. We never got that in any of the other ones.
Yeah.
He just kind of was somebody with perfect eyes, you know? But yeah, I do enjoy a lot. I did enjoy a lot about what they overglossed and the fact that they didn't stick around with, I know you said you kind of wanted an origin story. I was okay with the fact that they didn't give him one, because kind of like with Batman, you know, when we watched Batman v Superman the first time when I watched it, we didn't get an origin story, and I was like, thank God. I mean, we all know what happens. His parents get, you know, they showed it like in the opening credits, and that was the end of it. But they didn't have any kind of acting.
Yeah, but DC sucks.
Yeah. We've heard, we know. But as far as I go, wrapping up for my end, I think the best part about the reason why I picked the Raimi trilogy is the nostalgia, the fact that there were so many quotable lines. You know, obviously, with great power comes great responsibility. The fact that there's a hero in all of us. That Aunt May said that. The part where he fights Doc Ock and gets knocked out, and then his mask he has to take his mask off because he gets burned, the electrical burn, and everyone's like carrying him, almost like a Jesus moment, you know. And the kids are like, we won't tell nobody. Like that whole thing. The fact that they said nobody, that's a big New York thing.
What'd they say? careful, he's a hero or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
They're like, careful, careful, careful when they're setting him down.
Yeah.
When he's about, when he's doing the holding the train and he's about to fall and all the hands grab him and bring him in.
Yeah.
I mean, they use that in Spider-Verse. They show
Yeah.
they quote the Raimi movies, and I just think it's great. And the part where he's like, we don't talk about that, or he's like doing the dance from the third one. But for me, the Tobey Maguire movies are a staple. They're, as far as like a nerd collection goes, they're like the Godfather for nerd movies, comic book movies. You have to have them in your collection, and that's how I feel about them. And I could talk about Tobey Maguire being the best Spider-Man, forever, but I can also appreciate everyone else's opinions, which leads me to ask you guys that are watching, let us know who the Spider-Man that you prefer is. Which one do you absolutely hate, and are if there is one that you could delete from existence, which would it be? And definitely,
none of them.
And yeah, I feel like none of them, but everyone's entitled to their opinion. But definitely leave a question, because we only got one question this time, and we'd like to get more, because this is the part of the podcast where we address questions from the previous episode that you guys leave in the comment section. So in case we weren't clear the last time, definitely leave a question in the comment section of this video, and we will answer it in the next video.
Yeah.
And
before we jump to that, though, I just wanted to, real quick, let's rank the three, now that we've talked about it. As far as the character goes, Spider-Man's go. Which top three? 1, 2, 3.
So Spider-Man, not Peter, right?
Both as a character.
Okay.
Total whole.
On the whole, I think the best, still Toby. I think.
Yeah.
I think Tom Holland is a second.
Yeah.
And I think Andrew Garfield is the third.
I got Tom Holland at the top, and then Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire kind of neck and neck.
Okay, so
I might even put Andrew on top of them.
Okay.
Now, as far as the movies themselves go,
trilogies, right? Or
the whole series,
the whole series,
the whole accompaniment. We'll even say like the MCU as a whole for the new Spider-Man.
I think. Well, the MCU as a whole.
I'm just saying his parts, his story.
I got you. I would say I still put Toby on top, and then
really,
yeah, I would, just because Spider-Man 2 was so impactful for me. Just everything about it, and the first one even probably more so because of the origin, and we got that great J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then of
I'm
course
referring more to the stories.
The storylines
and like the cinematography / writing, like the actual movie production. Yeah,
cinematography. This is gonna shock you. I would put Garfield as number one.
Really?
Yeah. Not choreography, because that would be Toby again.
No, you're crazy.
Dude, that scene where he's like falling through the crane, and he plasters himself on the wall, like that was incredible.
I've got, as far as the movie itself goes, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's, Tobey Maguire's.
Wow.
I think hurts. The worst of the movies as a whole.
But I do appreciate your opinion, man. I gotta say, I can't be a hypocrite.
One last bit though, villains.
Oh, villains.
As far as the movies go, like his rogues gallery for Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, and Andrew Garfield. Who has the best rogues gallery so far?
It would be Tom Holland would be number one.
Same.
Number two would probably, I'm trying to remember, because I hated the Rhino. I think it was Paul Giamatti.
It's got to be Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, Tobey Maguire would be the second one.
The third one's got to be Andrew Garfield.
Because I can't even remember.
I think that's the one that we're in agreement with. I agree with the same with you on the villains.
Oh, because Vulture, man. Vulture just stole it
and
from
Mysterio
me.
was awesome.
Oh, yeah. I can't forget about Mysterio.
All right, so WLOF25 asks, how exactly does Ant-Man feel separated from the MCU, and what makes a movie to be an MCU movie? So I think it was me that originally commented on that in the previous podcast. And the reason I said that Ant-Man feels like it's not separated, that might have been how I said it. I don't recall exactly, but it just doesn't feel like an MCU movie. And in my opinion, it's just because the tone of the plot was kind of portrayed differently, and the cast was very different. There was a lot more comedic relief than there is in other MCU movies, so it kind of doesn't match the tone. And not that the other ones don't. It's just this one has a lot more. The main character is very different from anything that we have before, and he's kind of going through a completely unique story, and it just feels like its own thing, and you don't really see any MCU stuff in it aside from Ant-Man, right? It's pretty standalone.
Yeah, and on top of that, the fact that it's like coming from like a convict being the protagonist, that's very unorthodox, I guess. I think the bare bones storyline of like someone who's jealous, trying to ends up becoming the antagonist, and there's like a kid involved with kidnapping and all this other superpower. I mean, that obviously is very MCU, but the fact that the protagonist is probably the only one that's a quote unquote criminal, that may sit as something that's like a very good movie on its own, but not so much MCU. And then on top of the fact that I don't think Ant-Man, objectively here again, is like a fan favorite. I think Ant-Man is kind of like a supporting role. Like, even as much as I love Black Panther, I'm very well aware of the fact that if you put Black Panther and like Captain America or Iron Man, they're going to take the spotlight from Black Panther because of who they are and what they mean for, the MCU and just Marvel comics in general. But I think that maybe that's why. But I know I definitely don't feel that way. I know you probably, like, I don't want to say misspoke, but could have misled the person who left the comment and everything. But yeah, I definitely think that there's a reason, or there could be a reason why someone sees it either way. But I'm interested in what you guys think, and thank you for the question, because that's what this part of the video is about, or this part of the podcast is about. And yeah, so if you have a question about this episode and what we covered on who the better Spider-Man is, definitely leave it in the comment below, because we would love to cover it in the next episode at the end, right at this segment, because that's one of the better ways to interact with you guys, and that's fun. Do you have anything else to talk about?
No, I'm all set.
Well, I guess this is the time for the plugs, and I'm going to give some space in between us, as always, to show love to the patrons. Their names are scrolling up below or down below, or up. I don't know what I'm talking about, but anyway.
Right in this general area.
Yeah. If you want to support the channel monetarily, this is a great way of doing it. I have the links in the description below. I have different tiers that you can get. I know that there's Discord. There's getting to see these videos early, and this podcast, you can see it a whole day early, I believe is how I have it. There's different things like getting added into a raffle where I send you, whether it's a 3D printed sculpture or something, a collectible like a comic book or something special. Every month I do a raffle for my patrons. And yeah, just a great way of supporting local and smaller content creators like myself. But if you haven't already and you somehow stumbled on this video with YouTube's algorithm, definitely, if you liked it, give me a thumbs up. And if you liked it enough to consider watching more content like this, subscribe to the channel. That's a great way of giving back and of supporting the channel as well. And yeah, I guess that covers it with the plugs. This was a fun episode because Spider-Man is a very near and dear subject to both of our hearts, and hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you did, remember, give it a thumbs up. It'll help me out a lot with the algorithm and all that other good stuff. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. Sure, I just want honesty here. That's what we give you guys, and definitely want it back. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and we will see you next week for the next episode. I'm not going to reveal the topic, but I'm excited because it's going to be a good one. You guys take it easy. Love you all very much, and we'll see you in the next video.